What did Cambon argue about schools of thought? You can't have a system of psychological knowledge called African Black psychology without being centrally anchored in African cultural reality, the African worldview, thereby projecting the African survival thrust. What is the traditional school of thought proposed by Karinga? Black psychologists adopt a defensive slash reactive posture focused on criticizing European slash white psychology, focuses on changing European attitudes away from racism, focused on integration, but not strictly Black psychology. What is the reform school of thought proposed by Karinga? Black psychologists attack racism in European psychology and wherever it arises in racist American institutions, advocated A-B psych mix with European psychology through the addition of the racial experience perspective of Black psychologists to European psychologists to make the latter more universally applicable than it is. Focuses on correcting errors or falsification about African behavior in European models. What is the radical school of thought proposed by Karinga? Adopting Afrocentric conceptual framework for African slash Black psychologists, with some emphasizing traditional African culture and philosophy. Don't want to change white racist attitudes. Instead, they want to change Black attitudes about themselves, which is the construction approach. What is the racial slash cultural assimilations movement among African psychologists? It compromised majority of Black psychologists, never saw the need to question the cultural foundation of Eurocentric mistraining, believed only a problem was a few racist white psychologists that needed to be enlightened, never had a desire to gain full intellectual independence. These individuals merely believe that the problem in psychology is simply that some white psychologists were racist in their social orientation and they could be enlightened, then psychology in their hands or anyone else's hands would be fine. What is the Black American nationalism movement among African psychologists? Transitional movement. Their essential position is that race is paramount and that culture is a separate and relatively insignificant factor for Africans in America. The racial nationalist African psychologists do not consider worldview slash culture as an essential frame for reference for African or Black psychology, but more so the historical circumstances of the Ma'afa and the situational circumstances of Blacks continuing to live under societal conditions of European racism. What is the Pan-American cultural nationalism movement among African psychologists? Radical. It advocates that race and culture are the foundation of African self-identity. See all African people as one people. Worldview and race culture serve as a frame of reference for interpreting African and European existence. Cultural reclamation is the ultimate goal. working developing Afrocentric psychological theories and research, least represented but most supportive in formation of ABPSI. What did Kanban say of Karinga and Banks' models? Kanban seemed to deny, ignore, or de emphasize the fact that worldview differences define different cultural realities, approaches to knowledge, and the African victimization by the European worldview must be considered in conceptualizing African intellectual patterns. What did Baldwin propose about Black psychologists? Throughout the United States and throughout the world in general, had naturally brought to the study of psychology the same miseducation hangups and Eurocentric misconception that plagued the broader African community.